Well, week 2 is already here for the Denver Broncos. It is a chance to wipe away some of those sour memories of a stinging 17-16 opening loss to the Seattle Seahawks back on Monday night. And joining us to look back on that tougher game, but also to look ahead at the Broncos' upcoming home opener against the undefeated Houston Texans. They tied the Colts 2020 back on Sunday. Our very own Broncos Insider, Mike Klis. Mike, thanks for joining us here on 90s Plus.
Sure. Great to be here. What do you got, Chris?
Yeah, so I was going to start by, I think before I get into the game, can I start that I thought it was pretty awesome of Nathaniel Hackett owning up to the bit of a difficult ending to the last game where he opted for the 64-yard field goal attempt that was obviously missed instead of going for it on 4th and 5. But I thought it was pretty striking and pretty cool, frankly, back on Tuesday, Nathaniel Hackett owning up to it and saying, my bad, it was a mistake. What did you think of it, Mike?
Yeah, he did. He said if he had to do it over again, he would have gone for it, looking back at it. And then he quickly went into the plan of why he did go for it. He also quickly followed up with saying it didn't work. The field goal was missed, so of course I should have done the 4th and 5 and gone for it. So some people wanted a little more conviction in his regret. But I think the bottom line is he did say we live in a soundbite world, and the soundbite was, looking back at it, I definitely should have gone for it. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good for the locker room because he was getting beat up on social media from across the country. I think the whole confusion of it with the offense still on the field, while it was 4th and 5, and Russell Wilson looked like he was calling a play, and today he said he was calling a play, and then the field goal unit comes on. It looked like the operation was undisciplined. He did call for the field goal right away. The problem wasn't time management. They let the clock run down once they decided on the field goal, which was right away. Just looked sloppy. They'll work on that. But the issue was 4th and 5 and put the ball in the hands of Russell Wilson, or a 64-yard field goal with Brandon McManus, your kicker. And McManus has never kicked a 64-yarder before. It is in Seattle and not Denver, so the altitude's not going to help you there. He was not getting the ball through the end zone on kickoffs. Right away I was saying, man, this is why you got Russell Wilson. You got to go for it for 4th and 5. And Brandon McManus, I thought the chances were slim. He made it. He actually made it closer. I think thanks to the fact that he got a second try, he got a do-over on it with the timeout on his first attempt. He got closer than I thought, but still, I thought they should have gone for it. And in hindsight, with everybody second guessing Nathaniel Hackett, he second guessed himself. So yeah, I think that was good on his part. And Russell came back today and said he agreed with the coach's second guess. Should have gone for
it. Well, speaking of Russell, I thought he mostly looked the part on Monday night. Throws for 340 yards, no interceptions. I think his QBR was over 100. Not a bad start for him, especially in a hostile environment, right, Mike?
Yeah, I thought he was good. He wasn't great. Maybe a few more passes to receivers. The 11, passes to Javonte for 65 yards, and Javonte had to run for most of those 65 yards. He had to break a few tackles to get it up there. A few too many checkdowns, I thought, but Russell knows how to operate. It was just a matter of, when they have goal to go on 3 consecutive series and you get 3 points and not 3 touchdowns, that's the difference in the game. That's 18 points you're leaving on the field. And so, I think he threw for 340, threw for a decent percentage. Russell Wilson isn't the reason why they lost that game. I thought he did play well. The one concern I got about that game, Chris, that really no one is talking about, everybody's dissecting how they lost. The fact is, I don't think Seattle's a very good team, and I think that'll bear out as this year goes along. Broncos lost a game that they should have won against an opponent they were better than, and that's the concern.
Well, I guess that's a good transition into the upcoming game. Obviously, the Broncos playing the Houston Texans on Sunday at 2:25, home opener. I know this might sound a little hypey, but it's kind of going to what you just said there, Mike. Is it too overhyped to call this a must win? And I say that by looking at the rest of the schedule, and this is one of those kind of handful of games that looks very winnable, right?
Yeah. You know, it's a big game in the sense that think about if they lose, how the hounds are going to bark at Coach Hackett and another member. And I tell you, without Justin Simmons, who went down today with a quad injury, I mean, he is their, you know, I know everybody says Pat Surtain is their best defensive player, and he probably is right now, but he's in his second year. The best defensive player of the last 3 or 4 years for this team was Justin Simmons. They're going to miss him dearly. And so that's going to hurt their chances. I still think the Broncos win the game, but, you know, they're a little more vulnerable on that back end. And I wouldn't be surprised if Houston tries to attack that against the Broncos. Having said that, yeah, I you know, again, they got Russell Wilson to win these games. And they got him to – Seattle was kind of a weird situation, you know, with the hostile environment, amplified by, you know, 200 with all the boos, you know, the vitriol that they spewed Russell's way, the Seahawk fans. And so I think the Broncos will win. Everybody thinks they're going to win by a couple scores. That's the way it feels to me, but you got to go out and do it.
Absolutely. Anything, you know, the Texans did have a fairly impressive week 1 performance, tying the Indianapolis Colts at home.
Not only tying, Chris, they were up 20-3 in the fourth quarter. I mean, they blew that game. You know, that's the way Lovie Smith, they didn't finish. He called the tie as we didn't finish. And that's what a tie feels like. When you're up 20-3 in the fourth quarter and you end up with a 20-20 tie, that the feeling is you blew it. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Davis Mills didn't finish that game strong, and see if the Broncos can capitalize on that by bringing the heat with Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory in this game.
I guess one question, Mike, that I've got for you as well, looking back on that Seahawks game, it felt a little Jekyll and Hyde with the defense. First half, they weren't good. They made Geno Smith look, what was he, 16 or 17 or something like that in the first half. And then the second half, Broncos didn't give up a single point. Which defense do you think we'll end up seeing? I know that Justin Simmons' injury complicates this a little bit, but yeah. which is the real deal?
Yeah, I think the second half is what they can be. But again, I always think the test for defense in that situation, they did a good job keeping it close in the second half, and they made second half adjustments. Those are positives and encouragement. But, you know, the key is, you know, they did put the team behind. And last year with Fangio, that was too often the case. You know, you can do the job when the team's behind and keep the score down, but what happens if you take the lead? You know, can you hold them down that next drive? And they really weren't tested that way. They were never leading in that game. So I think the real test for the defense will be when the Broncos are leading, can they hold it? And they haven't had that opportunity in a bit. So they lost their last 3 games this year. They lose the opener this year, and they were trailing all game. They did tie it at one point, 10-10. But you know, I don't know. It's a matchup every week. This should be a good matchup this week because again, they're not playing a strong quarterback. They're not playing a top 15 quarterback. They didn't last week either. And Geno Smith looked great. So they have to start faster and play better and be more coordinated and communicate better than they did in the first half against Geno Smith, where they left 2 tight ends running wide open for easy touchdowns.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts about what we saw in week 1 and looking ahead to week 2 here, Mike?
Yeah, week 1, you know, I've seen all kinds of ways for the Broncos to lose. You know, they've had some miracle victories over the years too. Sometimes I wonder if life balances is catching up for that 30-year run where they had more Super Bowl appearances than they did losing seasons. You certainly hope not. They got Randall or Russell Wilson to change the tide there. But Broncos just outplayed. They I think 443 yards of total offense with all those penalties. It did look like they needed a little bit of a test in the preseason. They missed that, and they did look like a team that had not played in a while. So from the Broncos' perspective, their hope is they improve. That the biggest improvement they're going to make all year is from game 1 to game 2, and we'll see. I think they will. They're at home. They played well in the preseason, both games. They didn't play well on the road, both preseason and regular season. So it looks like home is going to be good to them this year. Run the ball. Russell Wilson does his thing. I think the Broncos will be okay.
All right. He's the best in the biz for a reason. Mike Klis, our 9 News Broncos insider. We really appreciate a few minutes of your time here today. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Chris.